Hello everyone and welcome to the Ultrasound podcast with me, Tom Evans, professional trail runner and winner of Western States in 2023.
I'm Brett Saunders, I'm Chief Crew Officer and best man at his wedding.
Hello everybody and welcome back to episode 3 of the Ultrasound podcast, and in this week's episode we are going to be talking about all of the gear that you need for your trail running adventures.
Perfect, so let's get stuck in straight away. Tom, how do you choose your gear?
I think for me, the most important thing about the gear that you have is to make sure that it's fit for purpose. If you're running in a super hot environment, then you're not going to need a massive jacket, and vice versa. If you're running somewhere really cold, you're going to want a puffer jacket and you're probably not going to want a singlet. So I think, for me, it's the terrain and the environment dictates what you're going to need. And I guess you can look at it like, what am I trying to achieve? What am I trying to do? And how can my gear work for me to make sure that we're at the right place to be able to do what you're doing? So, for example, like running in the UK is relatively safe. Like the weather doesn't change that quickly, and as long as you're like happy with things, you probably don't need to take a massive pack. Whereas if you're out running in the Alps, for example, you'll need a completely different set of things. Or if you're running in the desert, then you'll need a complete set of different things. So I think what is the environment that you're running in is the biggest factor for the gear that you need.
Okay, so as an example of that, Western States, you start in a ski resort in the snow, and then you end up running through the valleys where it's very warm. Did you change halfway through? How did you manage that one?
Yes, I did change. So I started with sleeves. I always wear a t-shirt. I don't know why, I just way prefer running in a t-shirt than a singlet. I think there's one for the sun, to get the sun off your shoulders, but also try and minimize the risk of chafing under your arms. It's just the most unpleasant thing is when you chafe, and it's just absolutely miserable. So just trying to reduce the risk of that happening. So I pretty much always wear a t-shirt to race in.
Yeah.
So I started Western States. Yeah, it was cold to start, starting pretty 3 hours in snow, I think, before it started getting warm. So I wore sleeves, and I actually then just ended up rolling the sleeves down and keeping them on my wrist for quite a while. It was quite nice. You could get them wet, and that sort of helped to keep you cool. I then changed t-shirt at the halfway point, and it just, not necessarily because I needed to, it just feels so nice to.
Yeah.
It's like putting on a fresh pair of socks is just a complete game changer. Is it going to make you run any faster physiologically? Who knows? But I think the mental side of things, it does make a huge difference.
Yeah.
It just feels like someone's just hugging you.
A fresh start almost.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a huge thing. And I could take a race like UTMB where the environment really does change. Typically I'd start in a short sleeve, and then after 3 hours I'd change my top for a long sleeve, probably with a zip.
Yeah.
A 3/4 length or third zip or half zip, I think is the right way.
Yeah.
And just so you can help cool yourself down a little bit, if you need to. But I think going into the night in a long sleeve is just really sensible, because it will get cold, especially because you got pretty high.
Yeah.
And then again, when the sun rises, then changing again into a t-shirt, just so you feel fresh, and it's almost like a bit of a reset, and it's then way easier to get back into things.
Perfect. Now, this is probably the biggest one then for you in terms of shoes. How are you choosing the shoe that fits you best?
I think shoes are a huge conversation topic in trail running, and I think it's becoming, as more and more big brands are getting more interested in trail running, I think shoes is it's a really interesting one. And I don't think it's a really tricky one. And if you look at other sports, like a football boot, for example, you'd have a hard ground version and a soft ground version, maybe an Astro version as well. So there isn't one boot that does everything. And I think trail running is different. If you're running Western States, is different to running in the UK in the Lake District, which is different to running in the mountains in the Dolomites, for example.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to make sure, similar with the apparel, with the gear, like your shoe choice is so dependent on what the job is at hand. Like, what are you actually trying to do? Like, if it's super technical, mountainous terrain, you'll probably want a different shoe or a different option of the same shoe for that, compared to if you were running on grass that was wet. And I guess like the easiest way to see that is the grip on the bottom. Like whether you want a shoe with big lugs, and the bigger the lugs, the more unstable the shoe because they move quite a bit.
Yeah.
But the more grip you have, or you take a lower profile tread on the bottom of the shoe that gives you less grip, but it's a little bit more stable. So it really is a minefield, and it's so tricky to figure out what you want to do. And I think that's why it, like, making sure to try different things to make sure that the shoe is working for you rather than you fighting against the shoe is so important. And I guess an example of that, at Western States, I wore a soft ground version of this is when it was still a prototype of the Adidas Terrex Gravic Speed Ultra. I used a soft ground version for this for the first 30 miles in the snow.
Yeah.
Because I wanted bigger grip. I needed bigger lugs because it's going to be running in snow, a little bit more twisty and turny. And it was, for me, seen necessary to have, I prioritized grip over anything else really on those initial stages of the race. Whereas then when I got to the halfway point at Forest Hill, I then changed my shoes. And I changed my socks as well. That just felt incredible. Yeah. I changed my shoes to almost exactly the same pair of shoes, but just with way, way smaller lugs, because I knew from spending time on the course and doing a course recce that was going to be possible. I didn't need as much grip, yet I still wanted a little bit. But then, it just feels nice to change your shoes. Like it's just one of those that, just a little bit different stimulus. Shoes feel a bit harder, then maybe they're not as hot, and it feels great. So I just want to jump in and say a massive thank you for Garmin for sponsoring. I've been using Garmin now for over 6 years, and it was actually my first watch that I bought when I was in the army. Now, as a professional athlete, I use Garmin 24/7 to measure not just my training, but my HRV and also tracking my sleep. For me, I find the most valuable things about my Garmin is using the features such as Pace Pro and Climb Pro for when I'm racing. This really helps me to gauge the effort, especially going uphill, to make sure that I don't go too hard too soon and I'm able to finish the race off in style. Finally, and I think the most important thing, is the battery life. Having a watch that can last longer than you can out on the trails is an absolute game changer, and looking forward to using Garmin for the rest of the season.
And with that shoe choice that you're having in those different stages of the race, are they pretty much nearly brand new shoes, or are they fairly worn shoes? How do you go about that with your training and with the race shoe?
Pretty much new. I feel, in my opinion, like gone are the days where you need to really like wear in a shoe.
Yeah, okay.
Like typically I'd run somewhere between 10 and 20 kilometers in a shoe before the race, ideally on a sort of fairly similar sort of terrain, just to make sure that stitching is right and the insole's in properly and all of those things. So typically like the Monday or the Tuesday before the race, if it's on the weekend, is the first time that I will wear those shoes. I think they just feel, I especially think now with these new shoes using like a softer foam, the foam does go out of place. I think in order to get all of the performance, there is a finite amount of miles that you can run in, which you can't really put a number on because it depends on the runner. The heavier you are, the more efficient you are. All of these things will change how long the shoe performs at its very best for. But then for me, once I've raced in a shoe, that shoe then becomes a training shoe. So the shoe life is actually really long. And like I take a Gravic Speed Ultra, like for me it's somewhere between like 800 and 1,000 miles per pair of shoes, depending on the terrain that I've been running in. Like in the UK, it's 1,000+ miles.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm in the Alps, where it's a bit more aggressive, then it's probably more like 800 to 850 miles per pair of shoes.
So does that race shoe then become one of your training shoes?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I will wear it. First time I wear the shoe will be Monday, Tuesday before the race, where I do one of my final runs, probably with like a little bit of intensity as well, just to make sure that the shoe is right and it's the right shoe for the trail. And then I'll race in that shoe, and then that shoe then sort of gets demoted, I guess, into my lineup of training shoes. And then I'll use it for training until I feel like there's no longer any life for me in the shoes. I'm not as worried about performance at that point, but at the stage that you can't wear the shoe anymore because it's ripping or they've got holes in or whatever it is. And then at that point you can then, I then decide. And actually we work really closely with a really cool charity out in Kenya where we send our used shoes and very, very used shoes out to Kenya. And then they're then used in Kenya and have sort of a second life out there and just prolong the existence of them.
Amazing. Now, I know you've been very heavily involved in building the Adidas shoe that you used and won in Western States and then also wore at UTMB last year. What goes into actually building that shoe? Is it loads of time in the lab? Is it your input as a runner? Kind of what feels good? How does it all work?
I think the really interesting thing with this shoe is when I said to Adidas Terex that I wanted a shoe that was going to be able to help me win Western States.
Yeah.
And like I am not a shoe designer, so I'm not the best person to advise on like we want this foam with this stack height.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting. One of the first questions that I was asked when talking about this shoe before it had a name, this was in end of 2019.
Yeah.
Was how do you want the shoe to feel? Like, what are the sensations? Like, and everyone knows it. Like, when you're having a good day running, whether that's on the trails or the road, you know when you're having a good day, things feel effortless. And it's like, how can we turn that feeling into a shoe?
Yeah.
And that was it. So I said, like, I wanted to feel light. I wanted to feel springy. I wanted to have, like, a pop in my step. And you take a race like Western States where there's more downhill than uphill. So we wanted a shoe that was able to deal with running downhill and increase your efficiency on the downhill running. So once they'd taken that idea, they sort of came up with a couple of sort of iterations of prototypes that did a little bit of testing in before then going into the lab. And then when we were in the lab, we then did sort of some downhill running, some flat running and some uphill running. Yeah. Comparing 4 different versions of the same shoe, and the difference was that we were using with different foam and the density of this P-Bax foam, and then also the stiffness of the rods going through the shoe. And what we were trying to do is what we found, the softer the foam and the stiffer the shoe, the better results in a lab environment. But trail running races are not run or won in the lab.
Fine. They
are won on the trails. So like with everything, you need to compromise a little bit. If you use the softest foam, the shoe will probably only last for 50 miles. So we're like, right, well, that's pointless. We don't want that because 1, we're racing for longer than 50 miles. 2, there then becomes a huge sustainability issue that you're just filling landfill with these shoes. So it's okay, well, we can't have this. Okay, well, what's the next best option? And you can then, we then sort of came to a very, very close version of the Agravic Speed Ultra. And we thought, right, we are 95% there now. We just need to change a few things. And for me, the thing that needed to change at that point was the upper. Like, it was just a little bit too rigid. Yeah. Didn't move enough. And it just wasn't that comfortable. It didn't drain the water. But I'm not the one to say, oh, we need to use like this material or that material. I don't know the intricacies. I know what the feeling is. And Adidas Terex were then incredible at sort of coming up with the final product that has now been.
So was there a process where you you got to a stage where you thought that was nearly right, went out on the trails, ran, then got some more feedback, went back into the lab, made it better? Was that the process?
It's just an ongoing, literally since end of 2019 when we had this initial conversation, and then the shoe was then finally signed off literally just before Western States 2023.
Interesting.
So it's and yes, the C word that we won't mention in this podcast played a huge factor in just slowing everything down, especially in China. So it took longer, but we were at the stage where we wanted to make the right shoe and make sure that it was absolutely perfect, not just for the elite athletes, but also for the consumer. Because it's really important as I guess the role of an elite athlete, like if you look at it at a granular level, like if you have a big sponsor like Adidas Terex, like where the finances come from is out of the marketing budget. So you are there to sell shoes to the consumer.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get you to buy, I'm sort of almost influencing, I guess.
Yeah.
So firstly, it needed to be right. And for me and the rest of the team to be happy to say like, yes, this shoe is great. It's going to be really beneficial for the wider trail running market.
Yeah.
But then also at the same time, fully making sure that it's not just a race winning shoe for the elite athletes, but it's the right shoe for you to wear
from London to Brighton and still be as effective as possible.
Huge thank you for Morton for sponsoring. I started testing with Morton in 2017 and was one of the first athletes in the UK to use it, and I've been using it every season since. I use the whole range of products, including the Drink Mix 320, the Gel 160, and more recently, sodium bicarbonate. The Hydrogel allows me to hit high carbohydrate goals with no stomach issues to make me feel my best on race day. Go and give Morton a go and fuel yourself for your next race. To benefit from your one-time code and get 20% of your next purchase on Morton.com, simply enter the code ULTRASOUND20 at the checkout. Valid until the 30th September 2024. The code is applicable on all products except the Morton bicarb system.
Now, I know you did mention like Western States, obviously you changed shoes and like there was a different profile from the early stage to the latter stage. UTMB is a bit more different, would you agree, in terms of it's constantly up and down on the rough terrain? Would you always stick in that one shoe? Is there if you were going to, obviously I know you said you'd change shoes because it freshens it up a little bit. Would you ever change, like you'd use one type, both Adidas obviously, but one type and then actually just change it up halfway through because it's another shoe that you like? Or
definitely, and probably will be the plan for this year. But also, again, it's so difficult to fully plan a 100-mile race, not knowing what's going to happen. Like you might feel great, you might not, you might develop blisters, you might not, and some of the time, no matter, we can do things in training and in practice to try and minimize the chances of these things happening. But racing's racing. Like sometimes these things happen completely out of the blue. So I'll definitely have an option to change shoes, and probably to a shoe that's got a little bit of a softer foam compound, just so it's a little bit more comfortable. Because at the end of a 100-mile race like UTMB, it's not necessarily about out and out performance. It's survival of the fittest. And I think a lot of the people who race UTMB or see UTMB think that the elite sort of feel great for the whole thing. And that is just not the case. Like you're still, yes, you've got good moments, but you've got a lot of low moments. Your legs are absolutely battered. You feel horrendous. And actually a small change like that can have a huge effect on how you feel. And typically like there's so much, there's such a strong relationship between how you feel and how you perform. Like if you feel good, you're likely to perform well. If you feel bad, you're likely to perform badly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you can make yourself feel a little bit better, it's not necessarily going to speed you up, but it's probably going to slow you down less.
Yeah. I guess it's kind of what's been spoken about a little bit. It's just preparation and having options that you can kind of deal with any scenario as and when it happens in the distance and time that you're racing.
Ultra running is it's a constantly changing puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you are trying to sort of put these pieces together. Sometimes you'll drop the puzzle and all the pieces go everywhere, and it's very difficult to put it back together.
Yeah.
But you need to have those A, B, C options. And then going back to the crew, like the crew need to know what's going on. Like, oh, Tom's complaining about his legs feeling bad. He might not have thought, oh, maybe he should change shoes.
Yeah.
And it might take someone to suggest, oh, what do you think about changing shoes?
Yeah.
And then it's oh, well, yeah, of course, that makes complete sense. But it might not have crossed my mind.
Yeah.
So I think it's so important that, again, everyone's on the same page, but it's something that you've tested in training, and you're prepared for the race.
Yeah, and this kind of like follows on nicely to the next question in terms of like when you're training, are you wearing pretty much like exactly what you're going to wear on race day? Are you training as you race in terms of you wearing the same pack, the same weight in your pack, t-shirts, stuff like that? I know we touched on it briefly a little bit about long sleeve tops, short sleeve tops, but I mean, is that what you're doing in your training, just to replicate the same outcome?
Yeah, I think with shoes, for the really race-specific sessions, I'll wear my race shoes. But I guess in a weird way, a Gravik Speed Ultra is such a good shoe, and it's so fast, and it makes you so much more efficient that I don't want to wear it the whole time, because I want to wear a normal shoe where I have to work a bit harder. So when I do put this shoe on, it makes even more of a difference because I'm stronger and I'm fitter. So probably like once or twice a week I'll wear my race shoes. But then the times I'm wearing like a normal, in road running, like you'd describe it as like a mileage shoe, like just a really generalist Swiss Army knife of a shoe. And I wear whether it's the a Gravik Speed or the Gravik Ultra, like just a different shoe. I slightly depending on what the terrain I'm running on is, but try and avoid wearing a race shoe the whole time. And it's just such an epic shoe that when you put it on, I want to feel the difference rather than that becoming the norm. And I think with kit as well, like it's pretty similar. Like trail running is fairly basic in the kit required to actually go for a run. Like yes, you can delve into way more detail in the pack, which we'll go into. But at the end of the day, like you need shoes, socks, shorts, and a t-shirt. So for me, like I don't really particularly avoid wearing race kit. Having said that, like I probably wouldn't wear like full race kit just for a normal run, because again with the shoe, like I want it to feel special. I want it to feel like you wouldn't. If you played for Chelsea,
you don't have to put that match shot on every single day.
Because when you put it on, you want to sort of gain that superpower from putting it on. So I train in a whole mixture of different fits, styles, sizes, and I guess like it depends what mood I'm in. If it's a really nice...
Want to express yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Like if it's a really nice sunny day, I've got a really cool, very, very garish Y3 Adidas, like proper cool trendy t-shirt. I'm not even sure it's a running top. It's like maybe a training top or something. It's been around for a while. Like super bright flowers on it, really cool. I probably wear it 2-3 times a year, but like it's special for me in a weird way. It's one of the things that I won't ever get rid of, because like on those few occasions of the year, you think, oh, today is the day that I'm going to pull this off, and I'm going to look horrific. I hope I don't just bump into anyone I know, but I
enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly. I absolutely love it, and I think that's like it's really key to be able to express yourself with that. And I think like in trail running, I think that's why a lot of people are gravitating towards trail running rather than on the road, because you can be a bit more individual. You can like customize things a bit. Like I'm forever customizing packs and changing things like that. I don't trust myself to customize shoes. That's far too high risk, and thankfully I don't need to. But the pack is again is a huge thing.
No, you just touched on it there, and you did a little bit earlier. But in terms of your pack, there's lots of different ones out there. There's some bulky ones you can carry lots in. There's this more streamlined ones. What would be your choice of pack that you'd wear in a race?
Again, it goes to what is it for?
So UTMB as an example. Let's use it UTMB.
So
as an example
UTMB,
this time.
there is a huge kit list in order for you to be safe, and I think it's really important that everyone at UTMB is carrying the same mandatory gear.
Yeah.
Whether you're going to do one night or you're going to do 2 nights, whether you're hoping to finish on the podium of the race or you're hoping to just finish in front of the cutoff times, like everyone's in the same things, which I think makes this sport so great. It's not as if, like in a marathon, so if you're an elite, you get your own aid stations and you get your own bottles given to you on the course. Like in trail running, like it's a level playing field. Everyone's got the same opportunities, which I think is really cool, and I think makes this sport really special because everyone's going through exactly the same thing. So typically for a race like UTMB, you'd want a pack that was a little bit bigger. So like I run in a pack pretty much every day now that I've started my training for UTMB, but it's a small pack.
Okay.
It's got the ability to carry like 5 liters worth of stuff, which isn't quite big enough for UTMB. UTMB, I'd say you need like an 8-liter version.
What's going into that UTMB pack then when you're on race day?
So on race day, a whole list of things that if I ever have to use in a race, something has gone really wrong.
Yeah.
But just because I'm not going to use them doesn't mean that other people, if things did go wrong, I would want to have them. And there are a couple of like little tricks that people do. So you have to, like we mentioned in a episode earlier about carrying a phone. Like I've always carried like a tiny phone that I like to call my prison phone. It's the size of your thumb, and it'll be perfect for hiding. And that bit's probably going to get cut from the podcast.
Where are you hiding it?
Maybe it'll get cut, maybe it won't.
Yeah.
We'll let David decide. But yeah, that's just to save weight and to save space. And obviously like a big chunky phone can dig in to you in places. But then like you have to carry a pair of long legs, like leggings or something. But what most of the pros do, because if I put my leggings on, I'm probably DNFing. Like things have got to be really, really bad for me to do this because I'm moving fairly quickly. And if I'm not and I really need them, I'm probably getting to the next aid station and pulling out.
Yes, okay.
So for me, like I use a pair of really thick woman's tights that they would wear like under a dress or under a skirt. And I cut the feet off them because it's really small and really light. And I know I'm not going to wear them. Whereas if you were doing UTMB and it was going to take you 36 hours instead of 20 hours, I would probably advise actually for the save of 75 grams, it's probably not worth it because there is way more chance that you are going to need to put them on, especially for your second night. But you've also got like waterproof trousers. So it's not as if I'm being dangerous. It's just kind of what people do. And it's seeing like what you can get away with that's,
I guess it's the margin, isn't it?
sensible.
At the top.
And there's a great story of years ago before I started running. I think it was Kilian's second UTMB. And for those who don't know Kilian, I'm sure everyone does, but is sort of the greatest of all time trail runner. And it said in the UTMB mandatory gear that you had to have a waterproof jacket and waterproof trousers. So he brought, like, you know how you'd get for like a teddy bear, like a tiny miniature waterproof jacket and waterproof trousers. He brought those. And they said, oh, like, where's your waterproof jacket? Where's your waterproof trousers? And he said, oh, it's here. And they're like, no, seriously, like, where's yours? And he's like, it's here. Like, I'm not going to wear them, but you asked me to bring a waterproof jacket and waterproof trousers, and that's what I've done. So now they specify that it has to be a waterproof jacket and waterproof trousers that fit you.
Really?
Yeah. Because people will try and get away. People
loophole, isn't it?
People will try and get away with what they can get away with. And now, like with the phones, like you have to have it now has to be a smartphone.
Okay.
So people are sort of looking up, oh, what's the lightest smartphone I can get? And the lightest smartphone, for those who have looked up that, is the iPhone 7S. And I bought one off eBay for like 25 quid. And that's what I'll use. That will be my race phone for this year, my iPhone 7S. Thanks to Plasmade for sponsoring the pod. Plasmade is a complementary plant-based adaptogen that has benefits across performance and recovery, as well as reducing travel stress. It's only to be taken pre and or post-race and training sessions, not during. Fundamentally, Plasmade, through its only active ingredient, French maritime pine bark extract, increases endogenous stabilized nitric oxide production, a vasodilator that increases oxygen uptake in the bloodstream and better circulation, as well as triggering powerful anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects. By Plasmade preparing and optimizing the body, the efficiency of your in-race supplementation and hydration intake is increased. So, in summary, you perform better and recover faster. Allow me to introduce you to Plasmade by using the code ULTRA20, that is ULTRA20, at the checkout on the Plasmade websites to receive a 20% discount, and join me in using Plasmade.
Okay, so when you are packing your pack, what is the most important thing that goes into that pack?
I think maybe not even like what goes into it, but it's how you pack your pack.
Okay.
And I think we're going to say pack a lot of times in this. It's going to start sounding a bit weird. When I was in the army, you would be doing, especially at night, you would need to know where absolutely everything is in your pack because you're not using light to find it.
Yeah.
And that's definitely a lesson that I've brought forward from the army into trail running.
Absolutely.
Is that my pack, I need to know where everything is in my pack at all times.
Yeah.
Because if I need it, I want to be able to access it immediately.
Yes.
Because it could be dangerous. So I want to be able to have access to it really quickly. But it also needs to be comfortable at the same time. So I will be forever in training, tinkering with my pack, figuring out things, or where should my foil blanket, for example, be? Or where's my main headlamp? Where's my spare headlamp? Or the thing that I probably use the most that you might take on and off a couple of times in a run or in a race is my waterproof jacket. And that's probably, in my opinion, the most important thing is having a good waterproof jacket because that can genuinely save your life.
Yeah.
So it needs to be super easily accessible. And you see way too many people, like, when it starts raining, people are on the side of the trail, like with their packs taken off, and they're sort of going into a waterproof bag inside their pack and taking out their rain jacket. By the time they've done that, they're already wet.
Yeah.
So for me, like being able to access my rain jacket within 10 seconds and have it on in 10 seconds is so important. So like the last thing to go in my pack will always be my rain jacket, and it'll be right at the top of my pack.
Yeah.
Because if I need it, I want it fast.
So you also did mention just a minute ago about your pack that you're using currently, training for UTMB, is not the right pack. At what stage are you then using the pack that you will be using before UTMB? How long before? How long will you be getting used to it? Yeah,
pretty much. Like, it's probably at the moment like once or twice a week, sort of for the longer runs. If I'm just going for like a hour, 90-minute easy run, there's absolutely no need to carry my poles with me. Yeah. But making sure that I've got the right quiver and I've got the right attachments with my poles is really important because that's not something that I want to be doing the day before the race. Like you kind of want to go into your taper, so 2 weeks before the race, knowing exactly what you've done and that you're ready to go. And like, yes, some things might change and you might like go. And I think the worst thing is that people will go to like the expo before a race and they're buying things there that they're going to use in the race. And you're just like, oh, come on, you've gone through your whole training without needing this. Like, you're sort of becoming like a bit of a magpie. You've seen something new and shiny and you're like, oh, I need to get this. And it's like, it's fine getting it. If you really want it, that's great. But like, make sure you can practice with it because like we've already said on the pod, don't do anything in the race that you haven't done in training. Like, don't try anything new. Don't let there be any surprises. Like,
run your race.
Yeah, run your race. Like, if it's been good enough for you in training, like, that's absolutely fine. But buying a brand new pack 2 days before the race because it looks cool and it looks newer than your one and it's the nicest new colours probably isn't the
right
best way to
decision
do it.
No. Perfect. So I've got a few listeners' questions for you, Tom. What are the 3 most important things that stay in your running pack?
So for me, waterproof jacket,
Yeah.
number 1. It's probably the thing that I use the most in the pack.
Yeah.
And that will always be at the top of my pack
Yeah.
or somewhere really accessible. My second thing is I always have a med kit, no matter how short the run is.
Yeah.
And in that med kit, I've got a foil blanket for if I get cold or someone else is cold.
Yeah.
You can wrap it around them. And having had to use that before, it's something that I wouldn't not want to have with me. And then also in the med kit, I've got a little bit of tape that can go on top of my shoe if I roll my ankle badly or someone else rolls their ankle. And I think those are the two most important things. And then the third and final thing that I'd have in my pack all the time is an emergency gel.
And was the pack used last year at UTMB when you had the issues at the top of Courmayeur?
No, it wasn't. I didn't need it, and I was a little bit too out of it to be able to look after myself. But I think it's those things. You hope for your whole career that you don't need to use anything for a medical kit.
Yeah.
But the time that you do, you'll massively thank yourself for having it.
I guess it's also a bit of safeguarding for everyone else who's in the race as well, which is good to know. Now, the next question was the most valuable bit of kit. You've kind of touched on that, so I'm going to ask, the top that you wore at Western States, was that made for the race, or how did that come about?
That was actually a cool story going into that top. So for those who don't know, the top itself has got loads of holes cut out on the front and the back. For us, we found that the most valuable cooling strategy for Western States was to be wet, and to sort of douse yourself with water as much as possible. But we found with all the fabrics that we used, the best way to cool yourself down is when it's windy and you're then getting the sweat or the water is being evaporated off your skin.
Yeah.
But if you're wearing a wet t-shirt that's holding the water, not that much air is actually getting to your skin in the important parts like your chest and your stomach and your back. So the idea was what we do is if we cut holes in it, still loads of water can be absorbed by the top and you can stay wet.
Yeah.
However, there is then easy access for the wind to get onto your skin so it can then evaporate the sweat, the water off that.
Yeah.
And cool you down. And we tried a couple of different options. And again, the amazing thing with Adidas for this was the granular detail that they went into, and it was all cut with a laser.
Oh, wow.
But the first time that we tried it, because it was cut with a laser, which is obviously hot, it left quite a jagged edge on the t-shirt. So it was really itchy. So it was finding a way that they could still cut it so it looked smart and it looked professional, but not having really jaggedy, itchy edges. It was really cool, and thankfully it worked, and it was very cool. And I've got a couple of others that for any hot races this year, if
you got some,
if it's hot, then I'll bring out the holy shirt.
Amazing. Now finally going on to a tale from the trail. Tales from the trails. Do you have any stories, Tom, that you've had any shockers with the gear out on the trails?
So in training, thankfully, I was trialing a new pack. This was a long time ago.
Yeah.
So I was trialing a pack, and it was pretty big, but I thought it fitted.
Yeah.
And it was so stretchy, and this was in the Grand Canyon. I was training in Flagstaff, drove to the Grand Canyon, ran down, and on the way down, it was just chafing so much on my collar. My collarbone stick out a bit anyway, but it's chafing so much and bouncing around so much.
Yeah.
Then I got to the bottom of that run, and then you're kind of stuck at the bottom, being right, well, what do I do? I can't go on like this. I'm sort of red, raw, bleeding from my collarbones.
Yeah.
So I then ended up like tying it round my waist and connecting it around my waist to make like a really weird like belt type thing. But it was, and because it had 2 bottles, I had 3 bottles of water because it was quite a hot day and filled up at the bottom. So I had like 1.5 liters, so 1.5 kilos of weight on my waist, tied together in like a massive pack. Blood coming down from my shoulders, just looking completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I did it in training.
Absolutely.
Like, however uncomfortable and however miserable it is, like, it's only training.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rather than, if you get to race day and you realise that's you going around the expo buying this new fancy. I thought this was going to be the best pack in the world, and absolute disaster. Worst trip to the Grand Canyon ever. You can't even look up and enjoy it because everything's hurting so much and you're chafing so badly. That
sounds pretty horrible.
How about you?
Have I?
Like, I guess when you're going into a race, like, are there any differences between, like, from what I've said about how I choose kit to how you might choose kit?
I wouldn't say so, to be honest. I'd say I've got a couple of running outfits that are, I would say, my go-to running outfits that I would say I look pretty cool in. But I mean, I'm sure people disagree. But there's just kits that you feel comfortable in, kits that you don't so much.
And picking shoes, like, what's the most important thing for you? Is it, like, does the colour and the brand, like, I guess it's difficult for me because...
I mean, I've only ever really run in a couple of different brands of shoes, and to be honest with you, I've just out and out always gone for comfort. Because spending time in the shoe and stuff. But I mean, the issue that I would have is it's very hard to buy a pair of shoes, run in them for a couple of runs, realise that they aren't for me, and you can't then send them back. So for like the reality is you've either got to buy that shoe and commit to it, or there are some really great shops that you can go and run on the treadmills in them, but I still don't think that you can find out enough about a shoe until you've done enough in them.
Convince yourself that you love the shoe.
Convince yourself. Yeah, exactly. So at that stage, there is an element of I'm buying it just because it looks quite cool and it looks quite nice. But I would say, I mean, very, very different, but very similar approach sort of thing. There's clothes that you wear on the day and that you feel comfortable in.
And that is the end of episode 3 of the Ultrasound podcast. Thank you very much for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the pod so you don't miss out on any new episodes. Tell all your friends and hope to see you guys on the trails soon.
See you next time.